Hello and welcome to Inside IT from the technology experts at Intel's own IT department. In this podcast, we look at a principles-based approach to privacy. Technological advances in our connected world are pressing businesses to re-examine privacy practices everywhere. That's true at Intel as well, where Stuart Tyler is a Senior Privacy Analyst in the Intel Security and Privacy Office. Tyler says today's privacy policies have their roots in the 1970s, at the outset of mass storage and significant compute capacity, and concerns about widespread surveillance.
And so the response to that was to craft the fair information practice principles.
Those principles were updated in the 1980s by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD.
And they were adopted pretty much globally around the world in many national laws. And that brought it up to date to the 80s. And then in 1995, the European Union actually implemented the Data Protection Directive, which is commonly regarded as probably the gold standard for privacy legislation around the world, although obviously other nations would argue that. But certainly it's had a very great influence on the direction of the privacy conversation internationally.
As you might imagine, trying to craft guidelines that govern data use in a variety of countries and jurisdictions that deal with public and private organizations is a difficult task, one that might create challenges for business.
One of the concerns of industry is that you could be very prescriptive, but still not actually get the desired result that you want. So you may prescribe very specific granular details in legislation.
And Tyler points out the very nature of computing has changed, so it's now part of most people's day-to-day activities, from setting the thermostat at home to browsing a website to buying something at the corner store.
So you have this vast tsunami of data being generated, and then data about data being generated, alongside the relatively new ability to be able to crunch and analyze that data, which then gives rise to concerns about whether or not all of that can actually happen in the current regulatory regime, which is primarily based on this idea that if you're transparent and you provide people with sufficient notice of what is happening and you provide them with a choice as to whether or not they want to participate in that, then it's all well and good and you can proceed.
Tyler says while some advocate discarding established principles altogether, Intel is interested in rethinking what's already in place.
Intel's adopted the principles of privacy by design in its development program, and these are internationally recognized principles for the design of technology and innovative solutions that end up with a win-win. So you get the utility of the innovation at the same time as protecting individuals' privacy. And I think that's incredibly important. I think it demonstrates the fact that you don't have to throw out privacy to get the benefit of the new data economy and new technologies. They can go hand in hand.
Tyler says he feels values like transparency are still critical.
They do serve a purpose in terms of explaining to regulators and civil society exactly what an organization's collection and processing and use of data is. I think what we're advocating is that privacy notices still hold value, and there's a need really to separate them out. There's a need for long-form notices explaining an organization's overall data handling practices.
And Tyler says, in addition to transparency, the principle of organizational accountability is a modern imperative.
So with accountability, the onus is on the organization to protect and use the data responsibly. So even in situations where the user may not know the organization has the data, it's incumbent on the organization to make sure that they're using that information responsibly, that they are a responsible data steward for the information in their control, and they make sure that they're treating that data in the same way wherever it is in that data lifecycle and wherever it's stored and transferred to.
This approach furthers the privacy goals set out in the 70s and 80s and makes them viable in the present, more technically advanced era.
The point about accountability is really it helps move the current situation from a place where you have some people saying that the existing principles are difficult, if not impossible, to implement, to a situation where you can focus on the appropriate use of the data rather than providing notice and choice and expecting individuals to police that.
And with so much information generated and gathered, consumed and analyzed, data security is another key principle.
It becomes ever more important to improve the security practices around the collection and processing of information to the point where users can freely engage with the digital economy, knowing that their information will be secured and kept confidential and treated appropriately.
Tyler says this is a key time for privacy practices in the industry.
I think we have a tremendous opportunity to apply technology to the problem of privacy, develop and innovate new and interesting solutions and drive economic growth, whilst at the same time applying the skills that we have for innovating in all these other areas into the field of privacy and security.
But Tyler's clear there needs to be a new approach to traditional privacy practices.
We genuinely think that they continue to provide useful guidance. And so our thinking there is that we need to adapt them to the new environment and not throw them out of hand, throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will.
Stuart Tyler says it's important to recognize and honor the fact that people do want to control who knows what about them and where, that they value their privacy.
It's still a very important and in some spheres defined as a fundamental human right. And so I think it's incumbent on technology innovators and people in the tech industry to be able to provide the benefit of the innovations, the technologies and services that they provide, whilst at the same time protecting people's privacy.
That does it for this edition of Inside IT. For more information on Intel's privacy policy or anything IT related, go to www.intel.com/IT. While you're there, you can sign up for the Intel IT Center for regular updates on IT topics, third-party research, IT-focused events, and more. For Inside IT, I'm Paul Lancourt.